All right, Ben, here's a demo that I want to show you on how you can use Perfect Portrait and Perfect Effects, and more specifically, how you can build presets for them. We'll start with this image here, this Perfect Portrait image. I'm going to send it from Lightroom to the suite by going to File, Plug in Extras, and go into Perfect Photo Suite. Now, the suite itself is standalone, so you don't need any other products, but if you have another manager or a library manager that supports pointing to an external editor, you can point it to the Perfect Photo Suite app. So what I did here was I sent the image to the suite, and this is the main interface here. This is Perfect Layers, and it's a layered workflow solution. So you have your layer stack right here. You can hide layers, you can copy layers, delete layers, and merge layers. You also have opacity controls and everything else you'd expect. We have some basic tools here like our transform tool. So this tool will allow you to resize and rotate. So you can kind of resize the image. If you hit the shift key, it'll constrain proportions. And if you put the cursor in the corner, you can rotate. I'm going to cancel so we don't commit that. This is our crop tool, which is the same crop tool you'd expect. So you'd make a selection over something and crop. The trim tool is a similar function where you would make a selection over the part of a layer that you actually want to keep, and it would automatically crop out the rest. This is our masking brush, so if you ever wanted to mask and reveal a layer below it, you can do that. We have some controls here for the masking brush. Paint out will actually mask out, kind of like painting with a black brush on a white mask. Paint in will restore. You can also invert the mask or flip it, and if you just want to start over, just reset that mask. The brush size controls the brush size. Feather controls the transition from the hard edge to the soft edge of the masking brush. And then, excuse me, opacity is the strength of the brush itself. Not to be confused with the opacity of the layer. This will control the layer opacity, and this will control the brush opacity. We also have a masking bug and a masking actually the masking bug, which allows you to kind of mask off of a horizon. And the show mask will allow you to see what the mask looks like. So this is an overlay mask. This is the white mask, dark mask, and the grayscale. So it gives you an idea of how to see where you're masking. And so we want to get rid of this mask, so I'm just going to reset it. All right, now it's time to send the image over to, actually no, before we begin then, or we move on, after the masking brush is the masking bug. I'll show you an example of that in a bit. And then there's our kind of refined brush. This is kind of like the Photoshop healing brush. So you can use this to heal out certain things, especially good for dust spots or scratches. Then you have your pan tool, your zoom tool, and your preview tool. The eye is the inspector. So think of the inspector as the control panel for whatever brush you have selected. So for instance here, I have the retouch brush selected. When I bring up the inspector, I've got the sliders here. To send the image to Perfect Portrait, just click on Portrait from the module selector on the top right over here. And that will actually send the image over to Perfect Portrait and begin detecting faces. So when it finds a face, it does a few things. First, it puts a bracket around the face, and it creates a layer for that face. So if you had 2 or 3 faces, each face would have a bracket and its own corresponding layer. The nice thing is that each layer that you have has independent controls. So these are not global, the skin retouching, for instance. Now, for me personally, I like to start with a baseline of 0. So you can see that Perfect Portrait automatically starts applying certain settings like the blemishes and the smoothing slider, as well as some eye and mouth correction, which I don't want. So I actually created a preset, which I'll bring up here. We have this preset bar along the bottom that's hidden by default. To bring it up, you'll click on this first icon here in the set of 3 over here in the bottom right. That will bring up your preset palette. And I'm going to go to the presets folder, and then I've got my Brian's Perfect Portrait. And here's my preset that I created called Zeroed Out. And all it is, it's a snapshot of zeros across the board. So it resets everything to 0. I'm going to hide that preset bar by clicking on this solid square. Now I can zoom straight to the face by going to View and then Fit to Face. And that brings us right to the face. I'll zoom out just a bit so we have some more context. The first tool that you'll see here is the blemish brush. And that's good for healing kind of acne areas or any scars that you want to get rid of. Does a really nice job here. What it's also really nice for is if you bring up the inspector and you drop the opacity to about 20 some odd %, and then you start painting under eyes, it does a really nice job of kind of smoothing out those areas and kind of brightening them up a bit without removing that dimension. It doesn't flatten it out. So you can still see there's a curve there, but it's not as harsh. It's also nice for kind of lines to soften the appearance of lines and wrinkles. So that's nice for kind of along the edges of mouths. Now we start refining the masks. So there are 3 masks that Perfect Portrait attempts to find. The first mask is for the skin, the second are for the eyes, and the third is for the mouth. To see it, what I would do is select the skin brush, and it's a brush when you select it. Each of these 3 things are brushes. And then bring up the inspector. And with the inspector up, just show mask and show overlay. And this shows you what Perfect Portrait automatically detected. So it did a nice job of detecting the face, but because the skin color is similar to her hair color, I want to remove that. But before I do, I want to just add in this part of the face. You can tell that I wasn't selected. So you'll see the painting mode by default is paint in. So what I'm going to do is essentially just mask in that area. I'm then going to select paint out, and I'm going to remove this swatch of hair and then also this area along her the left side of her face and then her neck, because I don't necessarily want the neck to be corrected. With that done, I'm going to still keep the mask up, but I'm just going to select the eye icon. And you can see that it did a really nice job of selecting the eye area, except I'm going to refine it. So again, the default when you select a different brush is the paint in. I'm just going to draw over the eyes. And then I'm going to select paint out and kind of remove that area there along the eyes. This eye is pretty good. And then switching over to the mouth, again, paint in. I want the teeth. You always want the teeth to be selected, and you want the lips to be selected. So what this is doing is just refining the control that Perfect Portrait already did. And then painting out, I'm just going to remove the bottom part of her nose and her neck, and then we're good. When we're done here, you can turn that mask off by going to Overlay and selecting None. Now it's time to correct. So when we selected the skin retouch, this brush right here, it corresponds to these sliders. So everything that was masked in will be corrected with these sliders. Now the first slider is the blemishes slider, and that's what I usually start around halfway. And the key to blemishes is that it actually it fixes the skin without removing pore structure, so you still see the natural skin texture. This also allows you to use a lot less smoothing. So the smoothing adds a nice kind of healthy glow. Under Skin Tune, we automatically do a color correction. So we remove any color cast here, and you can turn that on and off. So that's off with the color cast, and that's on without it. You can control the warmth as well as the color shift. So if you want to adjust the kind of micro adjust the skin hue, you can do that. And then evenness is if you have a model or a portrait that has splotchy skin, the evenness will take the mid-tone color of the skin and apply it evenly across the face. Now we have the eyes and the mouth. So the eyes and the mouth are pretty straightforward. Again, we use the eye brush to select the eyes and the mouth brush to select the mouth and teeth. The whitening will boost the whitening of the eyes so they're getting brighter. And then the clarity will add some sharpness, so it'll add a little bit more toothiness to the eyes, as it were. Whitening will, for the mouth here, will brighten the teeth. It'll also make the teeth whiter, and it'll brighten the lips. You don't want to use too much of it because then it just kind of looks like these chiclets. So we usually do about 25%. And then Vibrance really only attacks the color of the lips, so it adds a little bit more lip color. Looking at the eyes, I'm going to drop the strength of both of the whitening and clarity because they're a bit too strong. Now, here's where you come in. So I'm just showing you what these sliders do for a portrait. It's really up to you to decide how you want the look for a particular portrait. Where presets come in is when, let's say we shot this model and we have 30 shots of her, and I've achieved a look that I'm happy with in terms of the amount of skin smoothing, the blemish reduction, as well as the color temperature and the eye strength and the mouth strength. We can snapshot this in what's called a preset. So to do that, what I would do is I would go to the preset menu item and I'd go to save preset. With that done, I would call this, Model A. And then I'd create a category or a folder called Model A. So this can be the girl's name. You can put, your name or Clay's name, and then a description, use for all Model A images, and hit create. Now, if we go to the folder here, there's the Model A folder, and there's our preset. So what we can do is we can batch all 30 images, for example, through this preset that we created, and it'll automatically detect the face and apply these settings so you don't have to do anything. So the way you would do that, and I'll just cancel out really quickly and return back to Lightroom, is let's say you were doing it through Lightroom. I would go to File, File, Export, because we're going to be exporting some images. And then on top here, I would go over to, actually I'd have to add it, so just bear with me 1 second while I add the Perfect Portrait plugin. All right, so now if we go to File, Export, we'll have Perfect Portrait selected right here. And then I can go to the categories. Model A is the category, and then the preset is called Model A. So now I can go ahead and use Lightroom's, for example, if you're using Lightroom or if you're using any other product, you can use the predetermined export parameters, and it will automatically go through Perfect Portrait, do a face detection, and apply that preset. Now, for Perfect Portrait, we don't have a lot of presets. What would be cool is if you can create presets on certain looks. So kind of like maybe geared towards like a California sun girl look, or a Swedish kind of more of a cooler, winter look. Those are what makes good presets for Perfect Portrait. And again, with portrait retouching, I always find that it's more about the subtlety than anything else. So I wouldn't crank up brightness or the blemishes or the smoothing sliders too much, but it's just something that I would play around with again, you can do California sun for a guy and California sun for a girl, so that instantly doubles your presets. So I hope that helps there. Now let's move on to Perfect Effects. Let's go find an image that we can work on here that you can kind of tailor to. So I'm just going to find a good one that is always fun to work on. Let's just go with this one right here. So I'm going to repeat the steps here by sending it over to the Perfect Photo Suite by going to File, Plugin Extras, and Perfect Photo Suite. So again, the image is over here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Effects from the module selector. So how does Perfect Effects work? Well, the first thing you'll want to make sure of is that you're on the Advanced tabs. By default, the product comes in Basic, so click on Advanced on the top right over here. Along the left, you've got your tool well. So this is your masking brush and your masking bug, your pan tool, your zoom tool, your preview tool, and your inspector. Those are pretty much the same. What's primarily different here is the effects bar. The top bar here are the categories of the effects. So as you kind of select them, you'll see the effects change. The nice thing is also if you hover over an effect, you get a preview of what that effect will look like, which is really nice. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how we can kind of build out this image. The first thing I'm going to do is go to the Vintage category, and I'm going to go all the way to the right, and I'm going to apply Vintage Cool. So you can see here we have an Effects Layers panel, and here's our original layer, and then we have our effect layer. Just like with Photoshop or with Perfect Layers, you can hide the layer. You can also control the strength or the opacity of that layer, so from 0 to 100. We can also control masking. So let's say you didn't want the vintage layer to apply to her skin. You can take the masking brush and then remove it out. Now this is not going to be a good example because you can see how we're bleeding over. So it depends on how careful you are with your masking, but you can control that. Now, just like before, if you bring up the inspector, you can reset that to undo the mask. Now here's the key. with perfect effects. If I click on any other effect right now, it actually overwrites what we just did. So we wanted vintage cool. When you get the effect looking the way you want, you have to click add right here. And what that does is it does two things. First, it creates a new empty layer. But what's even cooler is that it re-renders every single preview on the fly to incorporate that effect. So now when you look at all these different previews here, like if you use the rain, for instance, it shows you the rain with the vintage cool. So this is really, really very nice. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to apply a texture. So we can go to the textures category. We actually have a really nice amount of stock textures to use. And I'm going to use this one here called Rice Paper Light. So when you apply it, you see the textures over here. And you can actually control various things about it. The first thing you can do is control the blending mode of that texture. You can use subtle, lighter, or darker. We're going to do darker here. And then you can see how there's a border. We don't want that. So what you can do with any texture is use the scale slider. And as you slide it out, essentially think of it as stretching the texture. Now you can see that the texture was applied onto the model, so I'm going to take my masking brush and I'm just going to paint it out. And again, I'm just doing a quick and dirty here, just so you can see. Just like with any other masking brush, you also have brush opacity if you bring up the inspector. So if you bring that opacity down to 30, it will remove at a slower rate, but it will compound. So each time you draw on it, it will go all the way up to 100%. And just like before, you can see your mask in one of 4 different previews. If you want to restore, just change the painting mode to paint in, and it'll paint that layer back in. And you can see right here, just like in Photoshop, the layer mask. So that's that. One last thing that's always fun, let's actually reset everything. So if we go to Edit and then Reset All, it basically brings you back to the original state. One of my favorite things is blending modes. So if you're familiar with blending modes in Photoshop, we have the same technique, except it's a little bit better. Actually, it's a lot better. Let's say I add a black and white layer over here, like Snappy Warm. And if I wanted to, in Photoshop, if I took a black and white layer and blended it in with a color layer, using, say, a multiply blending mode, I would get a really contrasty image. Well, we can do that here. So I can take a blending mode here by clicking on the blending options, and I can drop down, and unlike Photoshop, I can get a live preview of each of these blending modes. So there's multiply, and there's soft light and hard light. So it's giving you a really nice high key look. But multiply gives you that really edgy shot, and you, again, on the fly, control the strength or opacity of that layer. Now, let's say you want to build your own effect. Let's say you don't care for any of these black and white effects, and you want to build your own. Let's delete this layer, and to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the effect bar altogether by clicking on the solid square. This gives us more screen real estate. The effect options here, these are the basic toolkits that we use to build every single effect in here. So you have control over the exact same sliders and settings that we did. So let's say you want to build your own black and white. Well, here you select black and white for the first one, and you have these controls here. The first is a contrast, so if you want a really contrasty, punchy image, you can. Next is a color filter, so you can actually control what color, as if you put a gel in front of a lens shooting black and white film. Toner, let's say you wanted to have kind of a sepia look or a selenium, or your own custom. So if you want to kind of have something like a yellowish tint, you can. It's totally up to you. You can also control the strength of that tone. So the stronger it is, obviously, the more prominent it is. And then finally, there's film grains. These are actual film grain scans. These are not kind of composited. These are the actual film grains. So it's up to you if you want to add that there. We also have various other controls here. You can do a duotone. So if you want to do a cross-processed look, you can control what colors in the highlight, what colors in the shadow. So if you kind of went to something like, well, let's do kind of like a light blue, and then in the shadows we'll do kind of something like that. Oops. No, didn't select it. In any case, oh, that's why. You set to 0. So that's kind of what you can do here. And then again, you can take the blending options and then have fun with this. So you can kind of go to multiply. See what multiply has a really cool effect to it. Soft light and hard light. So this is presets for perfect effects. You can go nuts with perfect effects presets. There is no shortage of permutations of what you can do. You can either build your own custom ones, which I strongly recommend, or you can just take combinations of effects that we have here, use blending modes and stuff, and just create your presets. So again, just to create a preset, you go to preset, save preset, and then just like before, you would put your preset name, your category, the creator name, and a description. If you want to get access to your presets, when you're in Perfect Effects, go to Presets and then Show Presets folder, and it'll bring you straight to the Finder with the preset folders here. So let's say our friend Doug Landers created a pack of 10. They are here. The nice thing is that they're proprietary. So all you do is you double click on it, and it will automatically pop up with a dialog to import into the suite. So there's nothing that you have to worry about there. So with that, let me get this posted for you and watch it, and let me know if you have any questions or if you want to talk about things, what makes a good preset. Hope it helped. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.